14. Secrets. Jo was very busy in the garret, for the October days began to grow chilly, and the afternoons were short. For 2 or 3 hours the sun lay warmly in the high window, showing Jo seated on the old sofa, writing busily, with her papers spread out upon a trunk before her, while Scrabble, the pet rat, promenaded the beams overhead, accompanied by his oldest son, a fine young fellow, who was evidently very proud of his whiskers. Quite absorbed in her work, Jo scribbled away until the last page was filled, when she signed her name with a flourish and threw down her pen, exclaiming, "There! I've done my best. If this won't suit, I shall have to wait till I can do better." Lying back on the sofa, she read the manuscript carefully through, making dashes here and there and putting in many exclamation points. Then she tied it up with a smart red ribbon and sat a minute looking at it with a serious, wistful expression, which plainly showed how earnest her work had been. Then she retrieved another manuscript from a tin cabinet that she used to store her books, paper, and ink. As noiselessly as possible, she put on her hat and jacket, crept down the stairs, climbed out the back entry window, and swung herself down to the grassy bank. Once she got to the road, she smoothed her dress, hailed a passing omnibus, kind of like a bus or a taxi, and rolled away to town, looking very merry and mysterious. Upon alighting, what does alighting mean? Imee? Good. Upon alighting off the bus, she went off at a great pace until she reached a certain number in a certain busy street. She went into the doorway, looked up the dirty stairs, and stood stock still for a minute. Suddenly, she dived back into the street and walked away as rapidly as she came. She repeated this maneuver several times, to the great amusement of a dark-eyed young gentleman lounging in the window of a building opposite. On returning for the third time, Jo gave herself a shake, pulled her hat down over her eyes, and walked up the stairs, looking as if she was going to have all her teeth taken out. All right, so first of all, why did she leave the house as noiselessly as possible? Obvious answer. Why did she leave as noiselessly as possible? Chloe?
No, because the whole title thing is secret.
Very good. She's doing something in secret. For some reason, she doesn't want her family to know that she's going anywhere, first of all, nor where she's going. Then, when she gets to where she's going, she gets to her place, she gets off the bus, she comes to the building, she walks up the stairs, and then chickens out and walks back down. I can do this. She walks back up the stairs, and then turns back around. Can't do this. The third time, she goes, okay, I just have to do this. And she walks up the stairs, and she looks like she's about to head to a really nerve-wracking situation, like she's about to get all of her teeth taken out. Brooklyn?
Maybe she's applying for a job, and she doesn't want to run it, until she gets it, so she's got to get it, and then
Like ashamed? She certainly seems nervous about something. Let's see if we can figure out what it is. There was a dentist sign, among others, above the entrance. The young gentleman, who had been watching her, put on his coat, took his hat, and went down to post himself beneath the sign, saying with a smile and a shiver, "Yeah, it's just like her to come alone. But if she has a bad time, she'll need someone to help her get home." In 10 minutes, Jo came running downstairs with a very red face, looking as if she had just passed through a trying ordeal of some sort. When she saw the young gentleman, she looked displeased that he was there, and passed right by him with a nod. But he followed, asking with sympathy, "Did you have a bad time?" "Not very." "Well, why did you go alone?" "I didn't want anyone to know." "You're the oddest fellow I ever saw. How many did you have taken out?" Jo looked at her friend as if she did not understand him, then began to laugh mightily. Okay. Who is it that has, or who's waiting outside for Joe?
Lori.
Matthew.
Lori.
Lori. Why does he think she's there? He just gave it away when he said, how many did you have out? How many did you have taken out? Brooklyn?
He thought that she had a dentist appointment and she had a dentist.
Very good. But it just so happened the building she was actually going to was not the dentist, but it was in the same building as the dentist. Okay? So Lori thinks she's been to visit the dentist, but really she's been somewhere else. Yes?
I've seen the movie and I know which one. Me too.
Don't say it.
Me too.
Well, there are two of them actually, which I wish to come out. But I must wait for a week. What are you laughing at? You are up to some kind of mischief, Joe, said Lori, looking mystified. So are you. What were you doing, sir, up there in that billiard saloon? Anyone know what billiards is?
No.
It's pool.
Yeah.
Like when you shoot pool? Like the 8-ball?
Oh.
Begging your pardon, ma'am. It wasn't a billiard saloon, but a gymnasium, and I was taking a lesson in fencing. What is fencing? I mean?
Something where, it's kind of like sword fighting, but not exactly.
Very good.
They don't really use swords.
Very good. It's the art of sword fighting, but by using like blunt tip swords. So not actually swords, but like the motions and the acrobatics of it. So Joe says, "Oh, well, I'm glad of that. Why? Well, I'm glad that you were not in the saloon, because I hope you never go to such places. Do you?" Well, not often. Why would she hope he doesn't go to a saloon? Jacob?
Because that's where you get drinks, like alcohol and stuff.
Good. It's like a bar for back then. And she's hoping he never goes into those kinds of places. You don't go to such places, do you? And Lori says, well, not often. And Joe says, I wish you wouldn't. It's no harm, Joe. I have billiards at home, but it's no fun unless you have good players. So I come here sometimes and have a game with Ned Moffat or some of the other fellows. Oh dear, I'm so sorry, for you will waste your time and money, and you'll grow up like those dreadful boys. I did hope that you would stay respectable and be a satisfaction to your friends, said Joe, shaking her head. Does she approve of Lori playing billiards with his friends at the saloon?
No.
No. Lori walked in silence for a few minutes, and Joe watched him, wishing she had held her tongue, for his eyes looked angry, though his lips smiled as if at her warnings. Are you going to deliver lectures all the way home? He asked presently. Of course not. Why? Well, if you're not going to lecture me, I'd like to walk with you and tell you something very interesting. Oh, okay, I won't preach anymore, and I'd like to hear this news immensely. Very well then. It's a secret, and if I tell you, you must tell me yours. She says, if I tell you my secret, you gotta tell me what you were doing down there. But I haven't got any, began Joe, but stopped suddenly, remembering that she did. Oh, you know you have. You can't hide anything. So up and fess, or I won't tell, cried Lori. Okay, but you won't say anything about it at home, will you? Not a word. Well, I've left 2 stories with a newspaper man, and he's going to give me an answer next week, whispered Joe in her confidante's ear. What is Joe's secret? Jacob?
She wants to go get a book published, but she can't find out what he does with it.
Very good. She has turned in 2 papers, 2 of her stories that she's written, to the newspaper editor to try and get her stories published. But he has to read them and approve of them and want to put them in the paper before it will actually get put in. So she's waiting to see. It's kind of like she tried out, basically, and she's waiting to see if she's made it. Manny?
Yes.
Were they allowed to write? They're just now kind of being allowed to, yes.
they are like.
It's kind of a newer-ish type thing. Mm-hmm. Sophie?
I think this is where the movie starts. Yeah.
Yes. If you've seen the new movie, it hops back and forth a lot. Yeah.
It goes back from when they were little, and then when they're older.
Exactly.
It gets a little confusing. It really
Yes.
does.
Brooklyn?
Well, this is the show that me and my mom watched together, and it's called This Is Us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a show whenever their dad died and before, and then whenever they were getting older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hurrah for Miss March, the celebrated American authoress! Cried Laurie, throwing up his hat and catching it again. Shh! It's not going to come to anything, I dare say, but I couldn't rest until I had at least tried. I said nothing about it because I didn't want anyone else to be disappointed. So it's exactly what Brooklyn said. She didn't tell her family because if she didn't make the team, so to speak, or if the newspaper editor said, no, your stories aren't good enough, then her family would never know, and so they wouldn't be upset. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
She didn't want to tell everyone until she knew that it was actually going to happen.
Laurie would never get upset.
Laurie says, it won't fail. Why, Joe, your stories are works of Shakespeare compared to half the rubbish that is published every day. Won't it be fun to see them in print? Joe's eyes sparkled, for it is always pleasant to be believed in. Okay, well, where's your secret, Teddy? She said, trying to extinguish the brilliant hopes that blazed up at a word of encouragement. Well, I may get into a scrape for telling you, but I know where Meg's glove is. Remember the glove that she's missing?
Mm-hmm.
Back in one of the other chapters, it was a really tiny section of the chapter, but it said she only got one box back in the PO, but she had left two at the Lawrence's house. And now Laurie says he knows where it is. Is that all you know? She's like, that's what you're so excited about? You know where Meg's glove is? Said Joe, looking disappointed, as Laurie nodded and his eyes twinkled mysteriously. Fine, we'll tell then. Laurie bent and whispered 3 words in Joe's ear. She stood and stared at him for a minute, looking both surprised and displeased, then walked on, saying sharply, okay, well, how do you know? I saw it. Where? Pocket. All this time? Yeah, isn't that romantic? No, it's horrid. It's ridiculous. My patience. What would Meg say? Oh, I wish you hadn't even told me. I thought you'd be pleased. At the idea of anybody coming to take Meg away? No, thank you.
I know.
What does Joe mean in saying that someone might take Meg away? Brian? Being Mr. Brooke, taking her away to get married. Well, you'll feel better about it when somebody comes to take you away. Oh, I'd like to see anyone try it, cried Joe fiercely. So should I. And Laurie chuckled at the idea. To help cure Joe's bad temper, Laurie challenged her to a race. As no one was in sight and the smooth road sloped so invitingly before her, she darted away, scattering hat, comb, and hairpins as she ran. Laurie reached the goal first, and Joe came panting up behind with flying hair, bright eyes, and ruddy cheeks. Laurie went to recover the lost property, and Joe bundled up her braids, hoping no one would pass by till she was tidy again. But someone did pass. And who should it be but Meg, looking particularly ladylike in her best suit. So Meg says, what in the world are you doing here? She asked, regarding her disheveled sister with surprise. Oh, you've been running, Joe. How could you? When will you stop such romping ways? Said Meg reprovingly. Brian, you have a question?
What does it mean by pockets?
Pocket? It's in the pocket of someone. Layla?
It said 3 words. It said that he said 3 words. What are the 3 words? I know. that
I don't know.
Like-
It doesn't tell us.
it could have been Mr. Brooks something. Or, but then he wouldn't have said pocket because he said it after it when he said happy.
Maybe he said Brooke has it.
That word.
I don't know. Doesn't tell us.
But yeah.
So Meg comes across Joe as she's been acting very unladylike and running around. When will you stop such romping ways? Cried Meg reprovingly. Never. Never till I'm stiff and old and have to use a crutch. Don't try to make me grow up before my time, Meg, said Joe, thinking just how grown up her sister was becoming. Drawing Meg's attention from Joe's troubled face, Lori asked quickly, Where have you been calling all looking so fine? At the gardener's. Sally has been telling me all about Belle Moffat's splendid wedding. They have gone to spend the winter in Paris. Oh, just think how delightful that must be. I'm afraid I envy her terribly. What does it mean to envy her? Micah?
She's
Jealous, wishing it was her that could go and do that for all winter. Well, I'm glad of it, muttered Joe, tying on her hat with a jerk. Why? Asked Meg, looking surprised. Because if you care about riches, then you'll never go and marry a poor man, said Joe, frowning at Lori, whose expression warned her to mind what she said. What is she getting at? I think we determined now that Mr. Brooke has the glove, okay? But what is Joe getting at? Amy?
She's saying like that means she can't marry Mr. Brooke because Joe doesn't let Mr. Brooke to take her away.
Good. She's like, good. Well, if you're so obsessed with riches, then you're certainly not going to marry Mr. Brooke. Well, I shall never go and marry anyone, observed Meg, walking on with great dignity while the others followed. She's completely oblivious, has no idea. Followed, laughing, skipping stones, and behaving like children, as Meg said to herself. For a week or two, Joe behaved so strangely that her sisters were quite bewildered. She rushed to the door when the postman rang, was rude to Mr. Brooke whenever they met. Why was Joe rude to Mr. Brooke? Because of what Lori said. And stared sadly at Meg, who, as she sat sewing at the window, was scandalized by the sight of Lori chasing Joe all over the garden and finally capturing her. What went on between those two, Meg could not see, but shrieks of laughter were heard, followed by the murmur of voices and a great flapping of newspapers. Why would there be a shriek and then a great flapping of newspapers? Brian?
They were like the mailman or something like that.
Not quite.
I know. That would be.
The shriek is more of happiness. Caleb? Joe got her books published. But Meg doesn't know yet. Meg says, what shall we do with that girl? She never will behave like a young lady, sighed Meg as she watched the race with a disapproving face. I hope she won't. She is so funny and dear, just as she is, said Beth, who had never betrayed that she was a little hurt at Joe's having secrets with anyone else but her. It's very trying, but we never can make her comme il la faut, added Amy, who sat making some new frills for herself with her curls tied up in a very becoming way. Two agreeable things that made her feel unusually elegant and ladylike. In just a few minutes, Joe bounced in, laid herself on the sofa, and pretended to read. Well, have you anything interesting there? Asked Meg with condescension. Oh, nothing but a story, returned Joe, carefully keeping the name of the paper out of sight. Well, what's the name? Asked Beth, wondering why Joe kept her face behind the sheet of paper. The Rival Painters. Well, that sounds well. Read it, said Meg. With a loud ahem and a long breath, Joe began to read very fast. The girls listened with interest, for the tale was romantic and tragic. Oh, I like that part about the splendid picture, was Amy's approving remark as Joe paused. I prefer the lovering part. Viola and Angelo are two of our favorite names. Isn't that queer? Asked Meg, wiping her eyes, for the lovering part was quite sad. She's like, oh, guys, we always talk about how we love those two names, Viola and Angelo. Isn't it weird that they're both in that story? Yeah, who wrote it? Asked Beth, who had caught a glimpse of Joe's face. Who wrote the story?
Joe.
The reader suddenly sat up, cast away the paper, displaying a flushed face, and replied in a loud voice, Your sister! You? Cried Meg, dropping her work. It's very good, said Amy critically. I knew it! I knew it! Oh, my Joe, I am so proud! And Beth ran to hug her sister. Dear me, how delighted they all were, to be sure. And how proud Mrs. March was when she saw it. When she knew it. Hannah came in to exclaim,
Sakes alive.
Sakes alive, well, I never, in great astonishment. Joe laughed, with tears in her eyes, as she declared she might as well be a peacock. As in, she feels like she's showing off so much that like a peacock does. Oh, tell us about it. Stop jabbering, girls, and I'll tell you everything, said Joe. Having told how she disposed of her tales, Joe added, and when I went to get my answer, the man said that he liked them both, but didn't pay beginners, only just let them print in his paper. It was good practice, he said, and when the beginners improved, anyone would pay. So I let him have the two stories. And today, this was sent to me, and Laurie caught me with it and insisted on seeing it, so I let him. And he said it was good and that I shall write more, and he's going to get the next one paid for. I'm so happy, for in time I may be able to support myself and help the girls. Joe's breath gave out here, and wrapping her head in the paper, she wet her little story with a few tears. For to be independent and earn the praise of those that she loved were the dearest wishes of her heart, and this seemed to be the first step towards that happy end. Joe got her stories published, and there's some secret brewing between the two. All right, let me see how long the next one is.
Are we gonna
Oh,
have?
very short. All right, let's do 15 as well. It's 6 pages.
Are
And
we
then,
gonna literature questions?
then I'll give you the questions.
What is 200?
Yeah. It's upstairs. Chapter 15, a telegram. Yes.
What do you mean it's short? It's 6 pages. Short is probably like 2 pages.
Oh, you think so?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
That's short.
Okay. A telegram. Y'all like this one, though. November is the most disagreeable month in the whole year, said Meg, standing at the window one dull afternoon, looking at the frostbitten garden. That's the reason I was born in it, observed Joe pensively, quite unconscious of the blot on her nose. If something very pleasant should happen now, we should think it is a delightful month, said Beth, who took a hopeful view of everything, even November. And 2 pleasant things are going to happen right away. Marmee is coming down the street, and Laurie is tramping through the garden as if he had something nice to tell. In they both came, Mrs. March with her usual question, Any letter from father, girls? And Laurie, to say in his persuasive way, Won't some of you come for a drive? It's a dull day, but the air isn't bad, and I'm going to take Brooke home. Much obliged, but I'm busy. And Meg whisked out her work basket, for she had agreed with her mother that it was best, for her at least, not to drive too often with the young gentleman. Why is she not supposed to be driving with the young gentleman? Micah?
Because she does some, she may get like really mad.
With Laurie?
Mr. Brooks.
She might get mad at Mr. Brooke?
What?
She is not supposed to be with Mr. Brooke, but for a different reason. Chloe?
Wait, Mr. Brooke?
Uh-huh. Lori is going to drive Mr. Brooke home, and Meg says, well, I would, but I'm a little busy. But really, she and her mom agreed that she shouldn't spend too much time with Mr. Brooke.
She likes Brooke. They like each other. And because was she the one that went to the birthday thing at the mall?
Mhm.
And because of that.
No, but you're right. It's because it doesn't look great for her to spend all this time with Mr. Brooke, especially if she's kind of developing a little crush on him. So it's probably best that they don't spend too much time together.
I don't understand.
And they're unsupervised.
Oh, wow.
She's like 18.
She's like 16, 17.
I thought that was Joseph.
Or
Yeah.
maybe she's 17, 18.
No, she's
Somewhere around there.
18.
It's in chapter
Joe's 17.
Either way, she's not on her own yet.
Just maybe line up the numbers. Like this one's here, but then there's a 600. Like in the slides, like whenever you press on it.
So did the other one have all the slides match up?
Yeah, so this.
Are there
other
any
one-
extra left, or is that just?
No, there's some left. It's just like weird, like because it skips a bunch of slides. So
Okay, then
I
just
got
forget that
I
one.
got the first one done. This
That's
slide
fine.
was not this one.
That's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Come, Joe. You and Beth will go, won't you? Of course we will. We three will be ready in a minute, cried Amy, running to get ready. Can I do anything for you, Madam Mother? Asked Lori, leaning over Mrs. Marsh's chair with the affectionate look and tone he always gave her. No, thank you. Oh, except call at the post office, if you'll be so kind, dear. Father's letter hasn't arrived, and they're usually as regular as the sun, but there's some delay on the way, perhaps. A sharp ring interrupted her, and a minute after, Hannah came in with a letter. Oh, it's one of them horrid telegraph things, Mum, she said, handling it as if she was afraid it would explode and do some damage. All right, remember, telegrams back then were still a relatively new invention. So Hannah, being a little more old school, is kind of like, I don't like these new things. Here's your telegram thing. Oof. At the word telegraph, Mrs. March snatched it, read the 2 lines it contained, and dropped back into her chair as white as if the little paper had sent a bullet to her heart. So why did she turn white? What does that tell us about how Mrs. March feels? Aiden?
She's either really scared or really sad.
Very good. Really scared or really sad? Lori quickly dashed for water while Meg and Hannah supported her, and Joe read aloud in a frightened voice. Okay, you have to understand, back then in a telegraph or a telegram, instead of they had to make it as short and sweet as possible. They couldn't write these long drawn out letters because they had to pay for them, basically. Okay, and at the end of each sentence, instead of having a period, they would say stop. Okay, so it would say, Mrs. March, stop. Your husband is very ill. Stop. Come at once. Stop. S. Hale, blank hospital, Washington.
Stop.
How still the room was as they listened breathlessly. How strangely the day darkened outside, and how suddenly the whole world seemed to change. The girls gathered about their mother, feeling as if all the happiness and support of their life was about to just be taken from them. Mrs. March read the message over and stretched out her arms to her daughters, saying in a tone they never forgot, I shall go at once, but it may be too late. Oh, my children, help me to bear it. Help her to bear what? Brooklyn?
Maybe not make her sad.
Huh?
Maybe she not have to
What is she afraid has happened?
her husband already died.
Good. That she won't make it in time and he may have already been dead. Because it takes, a couple weeks for the telegraph to get from the hospital to her. For several minutes there was nothing but the sound of sobbing in the room, mingled with broken words of comfort, tender assurances, and hopeful whispers that died away in tears. Poor Hannah was the first to recover. She set all the rest a good example, for with her, work was the cure for most of her afflictions. Well, the Lord keep the dear man, but I won't waste no time a-crying, but get your things ready right away, Mum, she said heartily, as she wiped her face on her apron and went away to work like 3 women in one. She's right. There's no time for tears now. Be calm, girls, and just let me think. They tried to be calm as their mother sat up, looking pale but steady, and put away her grief and think and plan for them. Okay, where's Lori? She asked presently, when she had collected her thoughts. I'm right here, ma'am. Oh, please let me do something to help, cried the boy, hurrying from the next room, whither he had withdrawn, feeling that their first sorrow was too sacred for even his friendly eyes to see. Why had Lori gone to the other room for the time being? Jacob?
Does you want to hear what it has to say?
Not exactly. Manny?
He wants to fire every people.
Good. He felt like it was kind of a family thing and wanted to give them kind of their privacy. Okay, so Mrs. March tells Lori, send a telegram saying that I will come at once. The next train goes early in the morning. I'll take that. Okay, what else? The horses are ready. I can go anywhere, do anything, he said, looking ready to fly to the ends of the earth. Well, leave a note at Aunt March's. Joe, give me that pen and paper. Tearing off the blank side of one of her newly copied pages, Joe drew the table before her mother, well knowing that money needed for the long, sad journey must be borrowed, and feeling as if she could do anything to add a little to the sum for her father. Okay, in order for Marmee to be able to go and visit father in the hospital, she has to have the money to go, but she doesn't. Her only option is to ask Aunt March if she can borrow some money. Now, also remember that Aunt March did not approve of Mr. March going to serve in the army. She also did not approve of the money he invested, which he ended up losing, making him poor in the first place. So she's going to have to go and ask Aunt March for the money, knowing that she's probably going to give her a lecture about it. Does that make sense? Now, go, dear, but don't kill yourself driving at a desperate pace. There's no need of that. Mrs. March's warning was evidently thrown away, for 5 minutes later, Lorry tore by the window on his own swift horse, riding as if for his life. Yes?
Can the backup plan go see if they can ask the Lawrences?
The Lawrences, yes. But before they ask other people, they're going to ask their family first. Okay? Okay, so everybody springs into action. Okay, what can we do to help? Marmee has to go pack. She's going to have to leave for a couple weeks, probably. So how are they going to take care of themselves? What's Hannah going to do? Lori is jumping into action to go and send the note to Aunt March. All these things. Everyone's jumping into action to try and help get her ready to go as fast as possible. Chloe?
It's going to end up like the experiment with Marmee Bond.
ETC. Connor?
So, you said the telegrams take like multiple weeks. I don't think they do because she said send a telegram to them. I think it's like, because it's transported through wires. I think it like goes.
Okay, not several weeks. It's not like a Pony Express, but it was not immediate.
Yeah.
So by the time they had sent the telegram and it had gotten to her, it had taken it was maybe a day or two, maybe.
Okay, yeah, because she said send a telegram telling them that
She's on her way. You're right. Not a couple weeks. You're right. Yes.
Since it says that Lord is riding like his life, I imagine like the horse race and he's riding with them.
Yes. He's trying to get as fast as possible to help her. All right. Nope. We gotta move on. Joe, run to the rooms and tell Mrs. King that I won't be coming to help for a while. On the way, get these things. I must go prepared for nursing. Hospital stores are not always good. Beth, you go and ask Mr. Lawrence for a couple of bottles of old wine. I'm not too proud to beg for our father. Amy, tell Hannah to get down the black trunk. And Meg, come and help me find my things. Writing, thinking, and directing all at once had left the poor lady a bit bewildered, and Meg begged her to sit quietly in her room for just a little while and let them do the work. Everyone scattered like leaves before a gust of wind, and the quiet, happy household was broken up as suddenly as if the paper had been an evil spell. Mr. Lawrence came hurrying back with Beth, bringing every comfort the kind old gentleman could think of for the invalid, from his own dressing gown to himself as escort. That's very sweet. Mr. Lawrence he has come to offer himself to escort, or basically take, Mrs. March to her husband. He's going to help her along the way, kind of be like her bodyguard almost. But his last offer, him being the escort, was impossible. Mrs. March would not even hear of the old gentleman undertaking this long journey. Yet a look of relief crossed her face when he mentioned it, making it clear what comfort a companion would be. So, even as he comes to say, "Hey, Mrs. March, I'm going to escort you," he could see that she looked immediately comforted by that, knowing that she wasn't going to have to go by herself. Someone was going to join her. But she also, and right after that, said, "No, Mr. Lawrence, there's no way. This is going to be a long journey. I can't ask you to do that." And he's older, right? This long journey could hurt him or kill him or cause him to get sick, for heaven's sake. Okay? So she says, "No, I can't ask you to do that." But Mr. Lawrence saw the look in her eyes, knit his heavy eyebrows for a second, and marched abruptly away, saying that he'd be back directly. No one had time to think of him again until, as Meg ran through the entry, a cup of tea in her hand, she came suddenly upon Mr. Brooke. "I'm very sorry to hear of this, Miss March," he said, in the kind, quiet tone that soothed her perturbed spirit. "I came to offer myself as an escort to your mother. Mr. Lawrence has commissions for me in Washington, and it will give me real satisfaction to be of service to her there." Who did Mr. Lawrence go to get? Connor?
Let's go get Mr. Brooke because he's so much younger and could easily take care of him.
Very good. So he said, "Well, if you won't take me as your escort, then you're going to take Mr. Brooke." He is not going to let her go by herself. Good old Mr. Lawrence. The tea nearly dropped to the floor as Meg put out her hand with a face so full of gratitude that Mr. Brooke would have felt repaid for a much greater sacrifice than the one he was about to take. "Oh, how kind you all are! Oh, Mother will accept it, I'm sure, and it will be such a relief to know that she has someone to take care of her. Thank you very, very much." Meg spoke earnestly and forgot herself entirely until she remembered the cooling tea and led the way into the parlor. Soon Lori returned with a note from Aunt March, enclosing the requested sum of money, in a few lines repeating what she had often said before, that it was absurd for March to go into the army, and that she hoped they would take her advice the next time. Mrs. March put the note into the fire, the money in her purse, and went on with her preparations with her lips folded tightly. Why does Mrs. March burn the note from Aunt March? Ian?
Because she is mad that,
Layla?
She's probably, if she would say this out loud, this is probably what she would say. Okay, my husband is suffering right now, and all you care is that you were right and I was wrong.
Yes, very good. I'm going to say just that. If she could say it out loud, she would say, "Okay, my husband is suffering right now. And if all you can do right now is tell me how you're right and I was wrong, are you kidding me? I'm just trying to go help save my husband." Okay? This is not the time to be pointing out who's right or wrong. The short afternoon wore away. All other errands were done, but still Joe did not come home. They began to get a little anxious, and Lori went off to find her, for no one knew what kind of freak idea Joe might take into her head. He missed her, however, and she came walking in with a very queer expression, like a very weird look on her face. There was a mixture of fun and fear, satisfaction and regret in it, which puzzled the family as much as did the roll of bills she laid before her mother. With a little choke in her voice, she said, "That's my contribution toward making Father comfortable and bringing him home." Okay? So all she did was walk in with a weird look on her face and handed her mother a wad full of money. Like, "Where did you go? We didn't do anything stupid." No, it's mine, honestly. I didn't beg, borrow, or steal it. I earned it, for I only sold what was mine. As she spoke, Joe took off her bonnet, and a general outcry arose, for all of her abundant hair was cut short. beauty. Oh, my dear girl, there was no need of this, cried Mrs. March. Okay, but think about it. It's the one thing about Jo that is actually somewhat girly, is she has really long, beautiful hair. It's not that she means everything else about her is not beautiful. It's that everything else about her Jo doesn't care about. But her hair is the one thing that she's gorgeous and she doesn't have to do anything to it. She doesn't take care of her hands or her feet or her legs or anything. She's tan. She's not supposed to be. She gets sunburnt. But her hair has always been gorgeous. But she cuts it off and sells it to get money to send with her mom to take care of her dad. To make wigs or something like that.
I do that.
Everyone exclaimed, and Beth hugged the cropped head tenderly. Jo assumed an indifferent air, as if, I'm okay, I don't need it. I know my hair is now short and ugly, but I don't care. Which did not deceive anyone a particle, and said, rumpling up the brown bush, trying to look as if she liked it, "Oh, it's fine. It doesn't affect the fate of the nation, so don't wail, Beth. It'll be good for my vanity, or my pride. I was getting too proud of my mane anyway. My head feels deliciously light and cool, and the barber said that I could soon have a curly crop, which will be boyish, becoming, and easy to keep in order. I'm satisfied, so please just take the money and let's have supper." Okay? So she's telling everyone, don't worry, guys. I was getting a little too proud of my hair. I liked it a little too much. It's probably good for me to cut it off and have to deal without it. Not to mention, look, the barber says in just a little bit, it'll be short and curly. It'll be a lot easier to take care of. I'm fine, really. I'm not worried about it. Well, I am not quite satisfied, Jo, but I can't blame you, for I know that you willingly sacrificed your vanity, as you call it, out of love. But, my dear, it was not necessary, and I'm afraid that you're going to regret it one of these days, said Mrs. March. No, I won't, returned Jo stoutly, feeling much relieved that she was not entirely condemned.
What is that?
Meaning her mother wasn't that mad.
Uh-uh.
Well, what made you do it? Asked Amy, who would as soon have thought of cutting off her head as cutting off her pretty hair. Well, I was wild to do something to help Father, replied Jo, as they gathered around the table. So I passed by a barber's window and saw tails of hair with the prices marked. And one black tail, not nearly as thick as mine, was $40. It came to me all of a sudden that I had one thing I could make money out of. So I walked in, asked if they bought hair and what they would give for mine. Man, I just don't see how you even dared to do it, said Beth in a tone of awe. Well, at first he expressed no interest. He said my hair wasn't the fashionable color, and he never paid much for it in the first place. The work put into it made it dear, and so on. So I begged to take it, and told him why I was in such a hurry. It was silly, I dare say, but it did change his mind, for his wife heard me, and said so kindly, "Oh, take it, Thomas, and oblige the young lady. I'd do as much for our Jimmy any day if I had a spire of hair worth selling." What changed the barber's mind? What did Jo tell him that the wife said, okay, yeah, do it? Micah?
Just said that she was going to tell her father, and her wife heard that and said, "I'll just do it. I would do it."
But to help her father specifically because in the army. Okay? So, and then when she says, I would do it to help our Jimmy too. Okay? It sounds like she also has a child in the army that she would help if she could.
Also,
The husband, the dad, not.
Well, she has someone that she knows and loves in the army. Who is Jimmy? Asked Amy. Her son, she said, who was in the army. How friendly such things make strangers feel, don't they? She talked away all the time the man clipped just to distract my mind. Oh, but didn't you feel dreadfully when the first cut came? Asked Meg with a shiver. Well, I took a last look at my hair while the man got his things, and then that was the end of it. I never snivel over trifles like that. I will confess, though, I felt a little queer when I saw my dear old hair laid out on the table, as if I'd just, cut an arm or a leg off. The woman saw me look at it and picked out a long lock for me to keep. I'll give it to you, Marmee, just to help you remember its past glories by. For a crop is so comfortable that I don't think I'll ever grow my hair out like a mane again. Mrs. March folded the wavy chestnut lock and laid it away with a short gray one in her desk. She only said, "Thank you, dearie." But something in her face made the girls change the subject and talk as cheerfully as they could about Mr. Brooks' kindness and the happy times they would have when father came home to be nursed. This is a little bit of conjecture here, but who do you think the gray hair belonged to? Riley? The father. That's what I think. She took the hair from Joe and went to put it in her treasure box. And when she opened the drawer, there was another, a shorter gray hair next to it, which I would think is from her husband before he left for the war. In case anything were to happen to him, she would have that left.
How short did he cut it?
Oh, like a boy.
Like the boy did? Like how I want my hair.
I don't want my hair like that. My hair is short like a
It may be like Jacob's hair a little bit.
What?
Ooh. Can you pause it for a second? No, don't stop. Pause.
Jonathan was doing the recording.
I just listened to it.
Oh, great. Thanks. Okay. When the last job was finished, Mrs. March said, "Come, girls." Beth went to the piano and played Father's favorite hymn. All began bravely, but broke down one by one until Beth was left alone, singing with all her heart. "Go to bed and don't talk, for we must be up early and shall need all the sleep we can get. Good night, my darlings," said Mrs. March as the hymn ended, for no one cared to try and sing another one. They kissed her quietly and went to bed. Beth and Amy soon fell asleep in spite of the great trouble, but Meg laid awake, thinking the most serious thoughts she had ever known in her short life. Joe laid motionless and seemed to be asleep, until a stifled sob made Meg exclaim, "Joe, dear, what is it? Are you crying about father?" "No, not now." "Well, what then?" My hair!" burst out poor Joe, trying vainly to smother her emotion in the pillow. Meg kissed and caressed the afflicted heroine in the tenderest manner. "I'd do it again tomorrow if I could," protested Joe with a choke. "It's only the vain part of me that cries in this silly way. Don't tell anyone. I thought you were asleep, so I made a little private moan for my one beauty. How came you to be awake?" "Oh, I can't sleep. I'm so anxious," said Meg. "Well, think about something pleasant, and you'll soon drop off." I tried it, but I felt wider awake than ever. "Well, what did you think of?" "Oh, handsome faces." "Eyes, particularly," answered Meg, smiling to herself in the dark. Joe laughed, and Meg sharply ordered her not to talk, then amiably promised to make Joe's hair curl, and fell asleep to dream of living in her castle in the air. The clocks were striking midnight as Mrs. March glided quietly from bed to bed, smoothing a coverlet there, settling a pillow there, and pausing to look long and tenderly at each unconscious face, to kiss each of them with lips that silently blessed, and to pray the fervent prayers that only mothers can utter. As she lifted the curtains to look out into the dreary night, the moon broke suddenly from behind the clouds and shone upon her like a bright, benignant face, which seemed to whisper in the silence, "Be comforted, dear soul. There is always a light behind the clouds." Let's see what happened.
Do we still have to do